Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development. Today's topic is the role of regulated professions in combating human trafficking. I'd like to first, as always, thank my colleague, Senator Jerry Hill, for co-hosting this hearing with our committee, and thank you, Senator Hill, and to the other members that will be joining us shortly. I'd also like to thank all the panelists who have joined us today to provide their perspective and input on human trafficking and the role of regulated professions in helping to fight against trafficking in this state. The business of human trafficking is reprehensible. We all know that. And without advocates, regulators, and government participants, the ability for traffickers and trafficking victims to go unnoticed would be tenfold. I thank all of today's participants, including those joining in the public comment, for taking the time to talk to us about human trafficking and how we can work together and how we can better combat and fight human trafficking. As chair of the Assembly Business and Professions Committee, which has regulatory oversight over many of the professional licensing bodies in California, I am highly interested in ensuring that regulated professions are doing their part to ensure that traffickers are not able to hide illegal activities under the legitimacy of a professional license or regulated business. As a result, the Business and Professions Committee is committed to working within existing frameworks to help ensure that any opportunities for traffickers to legitimize their existence is ineffective, and professions who may unknowingly interact with victims are better equipped to know the signs and report cases or respond as recommended. At the conclusion of this hearing, the information presented today will help the committee understand what additional actions can be advanced at the state level to assist in combating human trafficking, whether through better data collection from healthcare practitioners about encounters with victims, better training and professional standards to ensure that traffickers don't hide behind legitimate business practices, or through additional educational requirements. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Senator Hill, for opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue as well as others, and what a pleasure it is to work with you in the committee. So thank you. This hearing, as we know, will focus on the critical issue for California as well as the nation and world at large, and that's human trafficking. It is considered, as we know, a modern form of slavery involving thousands of men, women, and children who are forced into labor and or prostitution. These are very vulnerable populations and individuals who, through coercion, abduction, deception, or other means, are exploited and forced into servitude. In fact, I just couldn't help but this morning in the San Francisco Chronicle, an article, Chinese immigrants flocking to San Diego. The unfortunate thing is many of them are unauthorized immigrants, and they're coming and placed into very difficult circumstances. And if I could read one thing, authorities discovered 12 unauthorized immigrants in the attic of a home in San Diego's City Heights neighborhood. On May 6th, they were being held without food, very little water, and no access to a restroom, according to Lee. And those are the conditions, unfortunately, that so many are living in, besides when they begin their servitude and however that's formed. As indicated by the Attorney General, human trafficking is an estimated $32 billion a year global industry. After drug trafficking, human trafficking is the world's most profitable criminal enterprise. The United States is considered one of the top destination countries for trafficking in persons. California, because of its populous border state with a significant immigrant population and the world's 8th largest economy, is one of the nation's top 4 destination states for trafficking human beings. The Attorney General has taken a very aggressive stance on human trafficking and created in 2012, as we know, a human trafficking work group to examine the nature and scope of human trafficking, to evaluate the progress made in combating human trafficking, and to identify challenges and opportunities in protecting and assisting victims and bringing traffickers to justice. Two things with the Attorney General and her work group emphasized was the importance of statewide collaboration amongst law enforcement and health care providers. The other was additional training of health care professionals who are often in a unique position to encounter and identify victims of trafficking. There's no doubt that some professions are more susceptible than others for being utilized by human traffickers. It is good to know, however, that some of the professions are working more closely with local enforcement and others to combat human trafficking, and I think we will hear about many of those today. Additional training, however, for healthcare professionals who may come into contact with human trafficking victims, and to better educate and to be better educated about identifying human trafficking victims, and what further steps should be taken is certainly an excellent idea. I would like to hear how we might be able to contribute to that effort, because to me, the idea is education. If every agency, every bureau, and every department and every board that we deal with in the business and professions, if they had the opportunity to educate their members, those licensed professionals in California, to the signs of human trafficking, to the exposure, to what it looks like, where you can find it, they could be those eyes and ears out in the world and in the state to identify it and bring it to justice. And in addressing the need that we have to deal with this serious problem and what more can be done by the licensed professions to assist in this effort, I'm glad to sit beside Assemblymember Salas to discuss and work together on this important issue and possibly find some very creative solutions, which I know the people in this audience today will have many. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate this opportunity, and thanks for your leadership.
Thank you. So with that, let's go ahead and call up the first panel, which is the overview of human trafficking. Robert Sumner, Director with the Office of Legislative Affairs for the California Department of Justice. Maggie Krill, Deputy Attorney General and Statewide Human Trafficking Coordinator, also with the California Department of Justice. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yes, good morning. Robert Sumner on behalf of the Attorney General. I'm more than happy to be here today. I've appreciated several opportunities to speak with members of the legislature about this critical issue, which the Attorney General has been very interested in since her days as a career prosecutor, bringing many types of cases that are analogous to the ones that we're going to be talking about today, largely from a regulated entity perspective. I think that really what we've been doing is we've been building off the source of knowledge that we've had since the passage of AB 22 a number of years ago, which produced the first human trafficking in California report, which really, I think, brought the initial light to the situation in California, which is a increasingly growing industry of slavery that permeates both labor and sex trafficking contexts. Chair Hill, you actually, I think, very aptly summarized the findings that we did in our follow-up report in 2012 insofar as the number of victims and the amount of profit that's generated by this industry. Really, I think that, several years later, one of the biggest facts surrounding the issue right now is just how much we don't know. There is unfortunately not quite as much data around this issue as one might suspect due to a number of reasons, including the fact that sometimes it's difficult to determine how many arrests and convictions are for actual human trafficking charges versus how many were for pimping and pandering suits. Obviously, a lot of cases are brought by the federal government. We're able to look at their numbers, but really in California, we don't have, beyond a local level, a great understanding of just what the scope of the problem actually is. It's even more complicated when you look at things like labor trafficking, where typically it's very difficult to distinguish cases of simple underground economy versus cases of labor trafficking. And I think growing the awareness there has been very helpful. From the Attorney General's perspective, and I'll be very brief, because really what I'd like to do is we've been engaging in as much enforcement as we can at the state level of this, whether that's enabling locals to bring their own cases, whether it's engaging in training activity, or in cases of licensing, where there is a health quality enforcement section or licensing litigation section, which handle our board representation. Where there is a nexus there, we engage those sections, as well as our underground economy unit, our civil rights section, charitable trusts comes up. It's such a broadly scoped issue that really the Attorney General engages in it wherever it can. But Maggie Krill is the coordinator of that effort. She is a Deputy Attorney General that prosecutes special crimes and has been serving as one of the AG's principal advisors on human trafficking. And she can really speak about a number of the cases we brought. I can really just leave her available for questions. But that has ranged from various actions and prosecutions that have taken place against entities like massage parlors, and also our recent planned enforcement around SB 1193 by Senator Steinberg, which has to do with the posting requirement. And all of this operates from the notion that when we talk about these types of regulated entities, these licensed entities, they can both be the perpetrators of human trafficking and also the first responders and identifiers of human trafficking. So that's why it's not just from a criminal justice perspective, but also from an outreach and training and information sharing perspective that we're really trying to approach this issue in collaboration with both local and federal entities. So I'll let Maggie introduce herself, but really we're available for questions, and we're grateful for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Thank you. Please.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Maggie Krell. I work at the Attorney General's office with Mr. Sumner, and we want to answer any questions that you have. I can tell you off the bat that the top industries that we're looking at for human trafficking, and this is according to the data available from Polaris based on the reporting calls that they get out of California and everywhere else, and this has been pretty steady in 2015 as well as so far this year. In terms of labor trafficking, it's domestic work, it's the health and beauty industry, peddling rings and traveling sales crews, and a small amount of agricultural so far this year. And the sex-based trafficking, which is far more reported than the labor trafficking, is hotel and motel-based commercial brothels, which oftentimes pose as massage parlors, and then street-based prostitution online at unknown venues, and then residential brothels. So those are the top industries where we're seeing it. In terms of how those industries relate to industries that are regulated, it's clearly the health and beauty industries, the massage parlor businesses. What we are seeing that's a good sign is there's a lot more community reporting than there used to be, and that includes businesses reporting other businesses with air quotes, and that's great because we can't enforce it if we don't hear about it, and it's not the kind of crime where law enforcement can act alone. It's the kind of crime where law enforcement really needs the help of NGOs, community members, multi-agency collaboration, not just government, but a community. And so that's what we've been working on. I've seen great steps in the last 2 years, in the last 5 years. Many leaders in those steps I've seen on the agenda later today, so they can give you some specifics. But collaboration has been really key and has been really strong in the Bay Area and Los Angeles and throughout the state.
All right, thank you. Let's just go into, if you could expand it a little bit, because obviously you talked about the health and beauty industries, massage parlors, and some of these entities that we actually license. I'm just wondering, we've had passed legislation. I believe Mr. Sumner talked about Senator Steinberg's bill. I know there's been a Lieber bill. There's been several pieces of legislation that have passed, but what should we be looking at, or what did those bills encompass that we should be looking at, or are we still getting some of that data back? Obviously, we had the 2012 Department of Justice report, but what are some of the things we can ascertain from that?
Well, I would say that SB 1193, the posting requirement, has been really positive in that it's increased. Because of the postings, it's increased the calls to the Polaris trafficking hotline, so it's allowed us to collect more data, learn more about the issue, learn what industries are being reported as having human trafficking victims. So that's really encouraging. It's been in effect since 2013, I believe, but there's still some catching up that needs to be done. There's still industry-wide a lot of agencies that are required to post that aren't posting, and the next step is coordinated enforcement efforts on that. The other thing that that I'll note is there has been legislation about, and some of it's presented now, about training in various industries, and that's another key. Making sure that folks that work in these types of industries are trained on how to look for human trafficking victims, what looks like a red flag. Coalitions have done that, have done tremendous work on that, but it hasn't been required. It's been something that folks have stepped up to do, and so the next step would really to have those kinds of things be required industry-wide.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Thank you. Robert indicated that you might be able to share some of the cases that you've been dealing with. I think that would shed some light on the real world situation that you encounter, and then what we can look at and kind of digest that to see if there are ways that we can work through that and create some legislation or something around that.
Sure. A recent case that we achieved convictions on centered around a massage parlor called AccuCare Massage Parlor. It had been in business for several years. We were able to identify who the owner was. Actually, he was the family member of the person that we ended up prosecuting. The investigation, played out like this. There was basically a lot of surveillance, figuring out who was coming in, who was going out. Officers observed all male clients coming in 20, 30-minute increments. When officers went in an undercover capacity, typically they would see different masseuses each time, so there wasn't a consistent, stream, like a normal massage parlor you would expect to, book with the same person each time. They might stay there for 5 years or something, but this was a rotation where we were seeing, people basically being in and out of that location, in 2-week intervals. Eventually, I'm going to skip some steps here, but eventually probable cause was developed to do a search warrant of the location. The search warrant turned up a lot of evidence about the finances of the location, and then other evidence such as buckets and buckets of condoms and paraphernalia that indicated to us that it wasn't just a massage parlor, that it was actually operating as a brothel. The next step, of course, is to interview the masseuses who are potentially victims of human trafficking, and to make sure that they're connected with victim services, because it's not really just about enforcing and prosecuting the suspects. It's also about doing everything we possibly can to help these victims heal. And so those are typical steps we take. In this particular case, we ended up charging 4 defendants. We ended up charging the owner, his right-hand man, the man who worked the door, and the owner's wife, who was actually very involved as well. The defendants were convicted. They were all convicted of felonies. The most culpable defendant, who was the owner, received a 10-year prison sentence. He pled to some tax fraud charges for not reporting any of this. Actually, it was failure to pay unemployment insurance tax was the exact charge, but also for pimping and pandering and conspiracy. There were other allegations as well, that another defendant pled guilty to similar charges. He received a 7-year sentence, and then the 2 other defendants were convicted of lesser crimes. That's a pretty typical example. One of the things that's important about it, though, is looking at it not just as human trafficking, but also a whole gambit of other crimes we can charge, because oftentimes, this is a continuum, and we might only be able to prove some wage and hour violations, or maybe we can prove some tax evasion, or maybe we can prove pimping, or maybe we get to the point where we can prove trafficking. But if we go in, whether we're looking for trafficking or whether we're a health inspector, we go in knowing all of that, then we really leave the enforcement options open.
Well, if I could follow up, Mr. Chair, which city was this in?
This was in Emeryville, California.
Emeryville, I know it well. Do you know was the city aware that this establishment was located there? Did it have a license, business license?
Yes, this is a case that the city of Emeryville collaborated with us on. There were actually health inspections done, and I think that is what started the investigation.
So they knew that the business was there. They had seen it, and are they the ones that complained about it, or the police
I believe
noticed
that
something?
they brought it to Emeryville Police Department's attention, and we got involved at a later stage. But it was a collaboration between actually Homeland Security was involved in the case. Emeryville PD was involved in the case. So it was definitely a local, federal, state team.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me just ask one more question, if I could, on the posting, because you said that leads to a lot of uncovering what's going on, and I'm just thinking, like Senator Hill was bringing up some of the licensing, and maybe do we expand training for like nurses or doctors or other groups to help identify human trafficking? So then do we do those training requirements just like we do with a lot of other professions? I mean, any thoughts on that type of approach, or something that might be more effective?
Yes, I think that would be phenomenal. I think that would be really, really helpful. I believe there's a bill pending that has to do with transportation workers, and and I think there's one for hotel workers as well, because those are two of the industries we've identified. Adding health practitioners to that, would broaden the spectrum of people that would be on the lookout for this crime.
Got it. Okay. Anything else you'd like to share?
No, but we very much appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and call our second panel up, the role of regulatory entities. If we can go ahead and Have Christy Underwood, Executive Officer with the Board of Barbary and Cosmetology. Amos Netanel, Chief Executive Officer with California Massage Therapy Council. Beverly May, Director of Governmental Affairs, California Massage Therapy Council. Mike Callaghy, Board Member with California Massage Therapy Council. I don't know how many seats we have up there. Do we have seats for everyone? Okay, I believe we have seats for everyone, so let's go ahead and bring up Benjamin Bodea, Acting Executive Officer with California Acupuncture Board, Sergio Azzolino, Chair of the Board of Chiropractic Examiners, Julie Ellinger, Dr. Peach, Public Member for the Board of Chiropractic Examiners as well. Good morning. How are you? So let's, why don't we just go ahead and go just like we're listed in the agenda, if that's okay. I think we have one more chair at the very end here, if you'd like. Can we, Sergeants, can we pull one more chair?
There's one right here.
Do you want to get that? Oh, they got it. All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us. So perhaps we'll start with you, Ms. Underwood.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. So it's very interesting. I'm finding already some work that we could do. So I'm the Executive Officer of Board of Barbering and Cosmetology. We don't have any data on anything that we have found in our salons. However, I don't know that we're properly trained to actually find that. We have come across several situations where we've found prostitution and have reported that to local law enforcement. Could that have been something more on the trafficking lines? We're not sure. We're currently working right now to increase our training for our licensees and our applicants, the students that are in school, on workers' rights. So that's something we're actually looking at right now is basically what happened in New York City, where they were found to have lots of nail salons where people were not being paid appropriate wages. We took the steps to develop some curriculum that'll be required to be taught in schools to students on workers' rights, and hoping to get that information out to our current licensees as well as students on what their rights are. It's not something that's been done before in our industry. So while we don't have any data that numbers of this happening in our industry, we have over 500,000 individual licensees. We have a large immigrant population through various license types. So I definitely think it's something that we're happy to learn more on and happy to look at what we could do to try to work with other agencies to hopefully address this issue.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and move to the California Massage Therapy Council. Come on.
Good morning, Chairman Salas, Chairman Hill, committee members, staff. That we came across early was we detected that there is a major trend of fraudulent schools issuing and selling diplomas. So we engage in a statewide undercover operations that has been very productive. I'm going to share some more information about it in a moment, and it has been going on since then. Earlier, there was already discussion here about outreach and education to the professionals, and CMTC has already done that. I asked Sergeant Arms to distribute to the committee an informational brochure that CMTC has produced. This informational brochure is being distributed to 50,000 CMTC certificate holders, and that's part of our effort to educate our certificate holders on this issue and how they can participate and help battling this problem. One thing I'd like to remind the committee that when there is discussion about massage parlors, and which many of them, when we talk about illicit massage parlors, they're really not massage businesses. They are brothels masquerading as massage businesses. CMTC does not have any jurisdiction over these kind of operations. The way the law is set up right now is they're regulated by local government. And so even though we don't have jurisdiction over them, we are very active in helping local government addressing this issue in many ways. One of them is training law enforcement. There's a very extensive law enforcement program that we've been offering local law enforcement agencies. And at this point, I believe we train more than 800 law enforcement officials, and it is still going on a weekly basis, working with the California Police Chief Associations, sheriffs, and other law enforcement agencies. We also work with ICE and with Department of Homeland Security. This is a very sensitive issue, and so I cannot really get into a lot of the specifics, but I will share with you, for example, one operation that we conducted, and that is we received information about the transaction was going to take place in a school where there was going to be a sale of more than 100 diplomas from a school for reportedly $3 million. We worked with Homeland Security in putting surveillance on that building, and all of that transaction was documented when we able to avert that. The issue of the schools is a very critical issue because human traffickers, their victims cannot receive CMT certification unless they qualify. And one of the qualifications, of course, is having the right documentation to receive the kind of education. That is a huge issue. So we managed to, in many ways, upset their apple cart quite extensively. We have unapproved 56 schools in the state, and I would mention that many of them were actually BPP-approved schools, and many of them still are, because we have different standards than BPPE, and it is still an ongoing issue that we're continuing to investigate. So cutting that conduit has been very critical, and it's proven to be very successful. Another issue that I'd like to share with you, and that is how prevalent is the issue. So I share with you a little bit a piece of statistics. CMTC has certified more than 70,000 professionals. The question being asked was how many of these people were really involved in human trafficking. Well, in a report that we provided the Senate, both the Senate and the Assembly Committee on June 1st, we indicated that at this point, in 2015, we had the first case the CMTC aware of. That particular case was a certificate holder who was convicted of human trafficking. That person was already suspended at the time of the conviction. And once we received a notice of conviction, this person was permanently revoked, which means they cannot reapply for certification. CMTC permanent revocation acts as a lifetime ban from CMT certification. So we've taken it very seriously, but so far we've detected one case. Another way that CMTC have taken a very proactive approach to the issue is we requested in 2014 from the legislature to actually create a dedicated seat on our board for representative anti-human trafficking organization, and we're very pleased that the law was amended to create that seat. And last issue that I'd like to highlight is earlier we were talking about collaboration. Well, I assigned our Director of Governmental Affairs, Beverly May, to be the full-time liaison to anti-human trafficking task force and nonprofit organizations, and she's being kept extremely busy, attending many meetings throughout the state, actually all over the nation. And we are right there sitting with all of the players and participating on a weekly basis on this issue. So I'd like to introduce Beverly May, who's going to highlight some of this.